Hello everyone, welcome to the Child and Youth Care Accelerated Program Information Session. My name is Melissa Tellis. I use the pronouns she and her, and I have the great privilege of walking you through some vital information about the program here at George Brown College. I'm a full-time faculty member in the Child and Youth Care Program within the School of Social and Community Services. I have been teaching at George Brown since 2010, and within Child and Youth Care and formerly Child and Youth Work programs at other colleges since 2006. I'm also a practicing child and youth worker or a child and youth care practitioner, and most of my time at the moment is spent working with young people who have witnessed violence in their homes, specifically violence towards their mothers or female caregivers. I have experience working in youth criminal justice, education, mental health, and community organizations. Most of my career in the field was spent working with young female-identified people who had some conflict with the law. Just kind of walk you through our agenda. We'll start with a territorial acknowledgement. Talk a little bit about, why choose this program, why accelerated, why George Brown. Talk a little bit about what child and youth care is, who we work with. I'll do a bit of a program overview, including field education and coursework. I'll talk about some of the student supports available at George Brown College, and finally end with admission requirements and application. I'll also provide you with contact information should you have questions after listening to this recording. So we begin with a territorial and treaty acknowledgement. George Brown College is situated on the sovereign indigenous territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe peoples, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We are all treaty people, accountable to the dish with one spoon, 2 Row Wampum, Treaty 13, and the Williams Treaty. Now, you may have heard territorial and land acknowledgements in other locations, and also you may have never heard of a territorial and land acknowledgement. And if this is not familiar to you, that's okay. This is something that we will spend time unpacking and trying to understand and learn about during your time within our program. Now, I want to take this opportunity to say that it is simply not enough to read a land acknowledgement and expect that it demonstrates commitment to this land and to the indigenous people who this land belongs to. So I often ask folks, and I engage in this myself, to take a moment to reflect on how you benefit from colonialism, how you benefit how we all benefit rather from the impacts of colonialism. Think about your relationship to the land, to your relationship to Toronto, Ontario, and North America, and then to think about the truth and reconciliation, and what our commitments are and ought to be to this land and to the indigenous people who are the rightful owners of this land. So, why choose the CYC profession? Child and youth care is a very relational practice, and that means we work with young people, and that work is grounded in building relationships with children and young people. And if that sounds like something that you like to do, then this is a good profession for you. Do you like to help others? Do you care about the well-being of others? Do you enjoy spending time and working with children and young people? And within that, centering their voice, centering their needs. we in this profession don't we don't do this work as experts. We believe that young people are the experts in their own lives, and we offer a walk through with them in whatever they're experiencing, and really center the needs and voices of the children and young people we work with. Do you like spending time with people? That's really important because that's essentially, like a great bulk of the job. We do spend time with children, young people, families, communities, and our colleagues. So this is not a job that's done in isolation of others. Do you have the capacity, or do you enjoy listening to people's challenges, struggles? Um, are you that person? Are you that person that everybody comes to when they're having a problem, um, to talk to? And think about, is that something that you enjoy? Is that something that makes you feel good? Is it something that you really dislike? Uh, and if it's the latter, you might want to consider um, what work would be like in this profession, because that is, again, a big part of the work that we do. And I think for me, one of the most important aspects of the work, and one of the most important aspects of your ability to do well in this work and to do well and honor the people that we work with, is to see um, the good qualities in other people. What are the strengths? What do they bring to the table? And sorry, that's for folks who are English language learners. Um, Bringing something to the table means, like, what are their contributions? What do they offer? And everyone has something. Are you able to see that? Are you able to dig deep sometimes and find that? And that's a learned skill. It can be a learned skill, but it's also really good when that's something that sort of comes naturally to you. It makes it a lot easier to do. Um, are you willing and are you capable of supporting others in overcoming their challenges without, shifting focus to yourself? Can you speak up for others? Do you have the ability to work with young people, to advocate with and for young people? Sometimes that's a risk, and again, that's a really big part of the work. Are you non-judgmental? Do you have an open mind? Are you able to hang in when times get tough? And times can get tough, though this working with any people, but working with young people who have experienced significant challenges in their lives, um, they're not always so willing to open up and trust you. You will have challenges in relationship building. You will experience challenges when people are having difficult times, and your job, this profession requires that you have the capacity to stay with to hang in, right? To stay with the young people, not to give up, to be the person that really believes in the young person. And also, do you enjoy working within a multidisciplinary team? Do you believe that diverse perspectives and diverse understandings offer creative solutions to challenges and to problems? And if you do, like, this is a place to be. Child and youth care workers work with educators, work with psychologists, psychiatrists, nurses, principals, parents, communities. The team is large, and at the center of that team, the person who kind of leads that team is the child or young person or the family that you're working with, and that's something that we really can't lose sight of. So, okay, what is child and youth care? Child and youth care, as it is defined here, looks at like specializing in working with children between the ages of 6 to 18, like chronological age, so that's their actual age, and also young adults who have developmental challenges and may be functioning at an age less than their actual age would indicate, or would dictate rather. And child and youth care practitioners work with families. This I think offers sort of like a good foundation for understanding child and youth care, um, but it can be more broadly defined. And there are opportunities beyond the 6 to 18-year-old range. Although again, it is kind of it is the focus and the specialty, particularly in this program. I do want to point out that young people or youth are considered in some contexts up to 24 or 30 years old. You know, if you were to go work at Covenant House, for example, which is a shelter for people experiencing homelessness, you would be working with young people between the ages of 16 and 24. So it does not, like 18 is not sort of the cutoff age. It is a little bit more broad, but this does offer a very like solid age range for you to consider. Okay, so where do we work? So we work within the young person's life space. What that means is that we go where the young people are. We go into their homes, we go into their schools, we go into the spaces that young people are in. That's kind of the bulk of the work. We go into communities. We sometimes go, you know, we might like go where they're practicing hockey or basketball. But we are really about understanding life space and being in that life space. That is our main focus. And when we can't be in the life space, we try to understand it, because we believe that through relationship, we can understand a space and then try to affect change if a change is needed within that space to support young people's development. So the focus of CYC work is to develop interventions and supports to kind of address with children and young people whatever their challenges are, whatever their identified needs are. Specifically, we work with children who are experiencing social, emotional, and behavioral challenges, but also, and more increasingly, we are working with children and young people who have diagnoses of autism or other developmental diagnoses. So, you know, I kind of explained to you where child and youth care practitioners spend their time working, but I'll just reiterate here, it's not sort of like a one-track field. You can work in hospitals, schools, group homes, residential programs, shelters, day treatment, foster care, crisis units, youth justice, and community outreach. I think that it's you know, if you're not sure about this field and you're not sure about any of those settings, it might be worthwhile for folks who are here and interested to go and explore, you know, what it is that child and youth care practitioners do within these settings, or what even is a residential program, what is like foster care, what does that look like, what is day treatment. So I would really encourage you, you know, if this sounds like a space that you want to be in and that you want to learn, to go and have a look at what some of these settings are. So as previously mentioned, we work with a range of young people. And we work with, our main focus is to work with young people and children who are demonstrating social, emotional, and or behavioral challenges. So we kind of get to take a look at what what that behavior is, what those issues, what those challenges are, develop some interventions with young people to support that, and then we kind of dig deep or try to unpack what is underneath that behavior, what is underneath that challenge, in order to support lasting change and positive outcomes. we work in a mentorship capacity, sometimes in a mental health capacity. Sometimes we work in youth employment, and there are, so a child and youth care practitioner might be helping young people to find jobs, might be helping young people to budget. And we also work within the child welfare system. So as you can see, you can address a kind of a broad range of areas. You can address a broad range of issues, all dependent on your particular aptitude and interest. I've talked about or I've shared with you that I have spent a lot of time working with young people in conflict with the law. I've also, which is in the youth justice sector, I've done a lot of that work, and that might be working within secure custody and detention or open custody. You've also got education, so working in a classroom, working one-on-one, working with an entire school. So there are, again, just reiterating a wide range of opportunities. There is also work in community outreach or school-based outreach, and that is like where you have the opportunity to go into community spaces where young people and kids are, and reach out to see how they're doing, build relationships. Are there supports needed? What assistance can you offer? The accelerated program here at George Brown is a full-time program. It can be completed in 1 year, which is 12 months. You would begin in May and you would go to April. It's completed over 3 semesters. Now, that's sort of like how it's set up, but some people may take longer to complete the program. It's not possible to or if you need to do all of the courses and placement requirements, it's not possible to complete it in less than 3 semesters. But sometimes for some of us it may take more, and that's completely fine. When you are done the requirements, you receive an advanced diploma in child and youth care, which is essentially the same as the 3-year program, but you're afforded this advanced or accelerated option. Sorry, not advanced, but the accelerated or faster option due to previous education. So you enter into the program pretty much at semester 4. That's sort of how we think about it. We call it semester 4, but it's really, the first semester for you. You take these courses listed here from May to August. You'll do an introduction to child and youth care and legislation course, which really helps to give you the foundational knowledge of child and youth work, and then also foundational knowledge of the laws that we need to know to do this work. Therapeutic activities engages you in how do you create activities that are meaningful and useful and fun and exciting for kids and young people. You take a look at counseling techniques, counseling skills, which include things like active listening, paraphrasing, summarizing, things that you may be familiar with or definitely you will learn. You look at development over the lifespan, well, not over the lifespan, sorry. You look at development from child to adolescent, the adolescent years, and perhaps a little bit of the young adult years. You take a course in human sexuality, and then you actually enter into your first experience of field work in that first semester, and you complete that for 7 weeks. Oops, sorry about that. And then in the fall, you do a crisis prevention and intervention course, which is a weekend course, usually that looks that helps you to develop skills to like de-escalate crisis, how to talk through crisis, how to identify crisis, and how to prevent crisis. You'll take a course that gives you the skills to do group facilitation, equity, inclusion, and anti-oppressive practices. You also take a course in trauma-informed approaches, mental health and child and youth care, and community-based practices. And then finally, in your final semester, you will take a course that is specific to developing the skills necessary for writing within the profession of child and youth care and social services generally. So there, there is a specific way that we need to write, which removes sort of subjectivity as much as possible, which removes assumption. And so we take some time to really practice that because it's really an important and necessary skill and maybe different than how most of us are used to writing. We look at working with families in that semester, and then you enter into your second and final field practice. So field practice or field education, you have two opportunities for this. You do the first one, like I said, the first semester that you join the program, and the second one in the final semester or semester 3 of your program. So the first field practice, the way that it is set up is that you are doing a field work or field education 4 days a week. So you go out into the field and you work there 4 days a week, and then you come into the college or online via Zoom, depending on where, or not Zoom, online, depending on where things are at. You have a day of academic classes. Then finally, in the final semester, you replicate that. So you have 4 days in the field and 1 day of academic classes. Field opportunities will vary. Field opportunities are dependent on what is available, what your interests are, and what the requirements of the host organization are. And there is a process. We have a dedicated field coordinator who helps, a field education coordinator who helps students to gain access to opportunities, and there's a really specific process which you learn about really early on in the program in your Intro to Child and Youth Care course. In order to enter into field education at all, you need a grade of 60, which is a C minus, in your Intro to CYC course and legislation, and there's also a host of paperwork that needs to be completed. Students are matched by our field coordinator to a placement opportunity based on availability and skill. And while our field coordinator does their best to accommodate placement preferences, it's not always possible. You do not seek your own placement. We have a process in place that is for the benefit of students to ensure equity, to ensure that everyone has access to opportunities, but also it is for the benefit of our host organizations that prefer this kind of matching method. In terms of coursework, it's really, really important for you to consider the fact that these courses are highly participatory. And so that does mean that you have to, on some level, make a commitment to attendance, to being open to having discussion, to small group activities, and to be completing some experiential activities. So that's, this is not a program for folks who may be averse to these kinds of learning styles. You will have independent opportunities. You will have opportunities for learning that are not participatory, but because of the nature of the work and the relational aspects of the work, this is really an important consideration for, I think, anyone who wants to join this program. Course, like, so the coursework, and I went over briefly the courses that you will be taking in your 3 semesters, and maybe longer for some folks. There's some standard criteria in order to get your diploma. The courses that we've that we've highlighted here in this presentation, you have to pass them all. Passing grade is 50 for most courses, except for courses that are related to field, and that's the intro course, field work, and field seminar. Courses will involve group work because it is an aspect of the work, that we do. Types of assignments, we have reflections, research, in-class projects, presentations, quizzes, tests, and group assignments. So again, it's sort of like the gamut. It runs the gamut of different kinds of assignments. But important to note that there is a range, that there is a variety, that there will be some individual, some of it will happen in class, some of it will happen outside of class, and absolutely for sure, nearly all of your courses will have an aspect of group work. George Brown, one of the great things about being at George Brown is that there is a wide array of student supports available. Now, because you are being trained to work with young people who are having challenges in their lives, that can bring stuff up for you. The work can be emotionally laborious. It can be very challenging, and that's normal. So George Brown has various resources to support students. Okay, this is just a list of some of the amazing student supports. I've had an opportunity to work on some level with all of these, and they are so focused on your success. They are so focused on supporting you. They're absolutely incredible. So we've got student success peer leaders, counseling, accessible learning services, tutoring, library workshops. There are supports for how to learn online. If you run into issues with housing, with food, job support, looking for work, either while you're here, but also even like post education, there's supports available. And then we have the Student Association. I'd also like to add the Black Student Success Network. There's a Human Rights Office. So there are lots of things available to students, and it kind of can be like overwhelming to navigate, but rest assured the faculty are here to support you, to get you connected to all the supports that you need. And currently there is a project that's happening in the college to ensure that students have the right information right when they need it so that they can access all of the supports that are available in a timely and an easy way. So what do you need to get, if you decide that this is like a thing for you, and I mean, I love this work. I so like honored every day to work with children, young people, and now with students who are going to do this work. What do you need to get? So applicants are selected based on academic achievement, which is the completion of a 2-year or a 3-year diploma or a 3-year or 4-year bachelor's degree. Volunteer experience with children and young people is highly recommended. It will give you some insight into what it is like to work with children and young people. So we definitely recommend that you have some actual experience working and caring for children and young people. CYC program is approved for OSAP funding, which is great for many students. But of course, you have to meet the OSAP eligibility requirements. Applicants with international transcripts who do not provide English proficiency test results have to do an admission, an English proficiency admission test, and you can find that information at the link provided here. If you are considering coming to George Brown from abroad, we have a very wonderful and supportive international center, and you can visit the link here for more information for international admissions. So you've made the decision, you want to apply, we're happy to have you. Please go to www.ontariocolleges.ca and the program code is C153, and there you will find all of the information that you, all the process on how to apply. So if you still have questions, and you may, please feel free to contact Judy Masters or Zelina Mohammed. Their emails are provided on the slides. They are the coordinators of the program. Both have a wealth of knowledge and experience within the field and within the George Brown system. Also, you can go to the website, and the link is provided there for more information specifically about like the courses that you'll take, or just more information about the program in general. What I recommend that you do if a question arises is that your first point of information be the website, because you may find what you need easily and readily available to you there. So I thank you so much for listening. Very happy to have had the opportunity to share with you today, and good luck on your decisions. Hope to welcome you to our program.